Sophia Amorouso is the founder and chief executive officer of Girlboss, a digital native brand and community redefining success for millennial women. She is a New York Times best-selling author of Girlboss, which Netflix adapted into a comedy series. As the founder of fashion empire Nasty Gal, Sophia has gone from one of the most prominent figures in retail to a cultural thought leader. Please welcome to the stage a fireside chat with Sophia and Claudia Chan.
All right, the last session of the day. How has it been? How does everybody feel? Are we ready for talking to Sophia? Especially coming off of activism, and we got our coffee.
We got some coffee, guys.
So right before cocktails. So, oh my gosh. So first of all, I'm so happy that you just got in from LA. Thank you for joining us. And I just want to start off, this is such a great conversation to close day one of She Summit 2018 because of your story and you representing being out there these years as this female force and entrepreneur, you know, in the media scene. And so the first question is really to start with your story. And, you know, how old were you when you started Nasty Gal? And for those that aren't familiar with you and the journey, just walk us through, you know, the beginning to...
It's a long story.
Yeah.
So it was 12 years ago. I was 22 years old, and like many of us, I was tinkering around on eBay, and this was before there was Etsy, this is before Facebook had taken off, this is before Instagram, and was seeing these eBay sellers sell stuff that I knew how to find and was wearing entirely vintage for much more money than I knew I could source it for. And I was a community college dropout. I was working in the lobby of an art school and had plenty of time to kind of dick around and see what this eBay thing was about, and tried selling a few things. Well, actually, it's a long story. There was like a hernia involved. I got that job for health insurance, which you no longer have to do anymore, which is amazing, because I had a pre-existing condition. But basically started an eBay store, sold vintage clothing. Not everything sold in the beginning, and like everything we do in life, we try. If it doesn't work, we do the things that did work, maybe something about it worked, and then we refine, right? It's like very common sense, and I didn't really understand debt or venture capital. I was like, wait, I have $5, and if I can turn it into 15 and then invest 7 of it and make it 30, then, and that's how it happened. And moved from just vintage to buying from the market, and went to Magic, our first trade show, in maybe 2007, 2008. And from there, bootstrapped the business to $30 million in revenue with no investors and no debt. I have no idea how I did that. Being naive is a great thing.
Was that to go from 0 to 30 million?
Yeah, so 2007, I did 75 grand. Okay. And then I did 250 in 2000. So 250, 1.16 and a half. It was 28, so 5 years.
Wow.
And then venture capitalists came knocking. I had no idea what that meant, so I watched a lot of YouTube videos about, you know, how to be smarter than your venture capitalists and their pet peeves. You know, their pet peeves when people pitch them. And at the end of the day, I didn't really have to pitch, which was actually like I wish I had learned that, because now I've had to go out and do it, and I'm like pitching myself for the first time. And so they handed me $50 million and said, make it 100 million in a year. And I hired 100 people in a year, and I was in my mid-20s, and it was a wild ride. And we eventually did over $100 million in revenue. It took longer than a year. And then I wrote this book in 2014, so it's been 4.5 years, called Girlboss. And I don't know who knew it today. Our community would have built Girlboss for us. The company's a 1.5 years old, but the hashtag's been used 13 million times on Instagram. And then there's this Netflix series that put the name into 150 million homes, so that all helps with marketing.
I just have to applaud that. Like,
sometimes it's weird to like hear yourself say it out loud, because you like wake up and you're like, do I want pancakes or like whatever? And then you're like, oh shit, what is that? Like, what happened? That happened?
Yeah. So, okay, so this is happening, and then Girlboss gets published, and I feel like it was one thing to run Nasty Gal, but then the book gets published, and then you hit mainstream in a new level, right? Because like I felt like that was then marketing you, Sophia Amorouso, I just feel like it went viral. It was like every millennial girl, and it was also the timing of it was huge because it was like during the women's movement and like everything was like
It was really before what we're calling the women's movement today. It was definitely, it proved how much of a white
demand.
space there was and how underserved women, and especially young women who aren't executives yet, are, because I took that book to, 10 different cities in 2014, and it was really like a mini conference. We do something called the Girl Boss Rally today, and that was really the genesis of it, because there was 200 women in a Barnes & Noble who had maybe just moved to New York City and were attending, is it FIT here? Mm-hmm. Stuff like that, and they'd come in and they'd wait in line to get their book signed, but they were really there exchanging business cards. Like, they were there meeting like-minded women, because there's nowhere else for you outside of, and even as an executive, that's really hard. And so finding that network and finding that community was something that they really did for themselves, because a book went out into the world and said, like, hey, you can do that. And I think at the end of the day, it's like, yes, I'm on the stage. Yes, I was the one in the magazines. But the community built itself, and people like to give away credit for, like, wow, I started my business because of you. But at the end of the day, like, I didn't do anything for anybody. Anyone who starts a business or anyone who asks for a raise, they did it themselves. And I think it's very easy to give that credit away to other people. Mm-hmm. And I really try to remind people of that.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting too, in that it was your story, because of, like, Girl Boss represented also being this like young female that became an entrepreneur and like had that freedom, right? Like, you're able to build something. And speaking also of, we're talking all day about the private, like the workplace and the corporate sector, and how yet is this young female generation that is like, how are like companies even like retaining, trying to hire young women who want to be entrepreneurs, right? And it's and just how much there is that craving out there. And so before we talk more about, because I'm so curious as to the psychographics of these young women that crave Girl Boss and the girl rallies, and like the craving the entrepreneurship and like what they're struggling with or what they're desiring, is because then it was like you're rising, and then, and often we think, okay, leadership is just, everything's great and we could continue to grow, but it's filled with
totally. So you want to talk about what happened after the rise?
and the roller coaster.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So that was a wild ride, right? And the even wilder ride was when it all came crashing down in the end of 2016, and Nasty Gal filed for Chapter 11. And this was 6 months after my husband had left me, and about 7 months after I was on the cover of Forbes. So it was really, and 4 months before a Netflix series came out about this company called Nasty Gal that I was no longer a part of. So it was like really kind of mind-boggling having all of that happen, and then having the whole world see this girl at 22 years old thinking that that's who I am, when I'm actually like totally trying to start over. So that was just like such a mind boggle. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, 10 years in fashion was a long time. Like, I love getting dressed, but I never intended to be a fashion CEO. And I like tried to dress the part, and I wore it was fun, but I had some like crazy haircuts, but it's nice to be past that and to go to work wearing the same thing every day and be like, cool, no one's expecting me to be a fashion CEO, like whatever that means. I felt like I had to show up in like really cool outfits all the time. But I learned a lot from it, and it was really only till the end of Nasty Gal that I knew what I could have been doing and should have been doing. And by the time I tried to apply those things, so much was already set into motion. It's really hard to turn a culture and to turn a business when it's moving super fast and it's larger than a very small business. And also one that had grown super fast. And so, when the tide lowers, you see everything that's underneath it, and then it's like, sometimes it's too late to do anything about it. So,
and the greatest, like, now looking back, and and I would say like things happen for us. And I had a very similar, because I ran a company for 10 years that, where it was very, just writing something and watching it fall apart, or finding myself at a place where I wasn't happy anymore. But then I felt like like later on in life, it also birthed this idea of She Global, and I'm so grateful for that past experience. But the lessons learned, because to me this is a leadership story, and like this is a leadership conference, and you know, like what would you say are the tools that you've gained out of it, or the things that matter? Like how have you evolved as a leader, or your strength, you know, that we could share?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of it is structure, which doesn't always come naturally to us, and being strategic and having a long-term vision. When something just explodes, or when you wind up in a very serendipitous place, that can be a great thing, but it also means that there probably isn't a plan. And so the flip side of that is saying, like, what do I want to be? What do I want to build? And then just seeing as far as you can into that, and then just having like a straight line to it. Because if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how much money you're making or what kind of path you're on. Eventually, when you're looking this far into the future, even if it's a great, you know, current state, you can find yourself in a place that you never really planned to be. And as far as leadership goes, it's like, I think I did everything wrong that I possibly could have, because I'd never worked in an office before, and there I am, like building a company of hundreds of people. So I'd say transparency, like actually living up to the values of the company, which is incredibly hard for any startup. We talk about wellness and mental health all day long at Girl Boss, but it's a startup, and we're grinding, and we're working really long days, so how can we live have workplace wellness in an environment where it's like we all have to be lifting so much off the ground. So living up to a company with a name called Girl Boss is something I take very seriously, but something that we will always be able to do better on. I learned everything.
Yeah. And when you say also like the dream now, so tell us and by the way, actually, let's just really quickly on mental health before we go into the vision, that's actually my greatest concern right now for women in this movement is our health. And I think that we are just being taught, even in our workplace, right? Like, mentorship programs, or how to negotiate better, or how to, everything's around like professional skill building, which is super important. But then we're piling on more responsibility. But then, if you have children, or, if there are health issues, or an older parent, we're not taking things off of our plate as we're adding things onto our plate. And so I think that, I love that you talk about mental health, and because stress also, when you are overwhelmed, that turns into anxiety. Anxiety turns into other health issues. So, in terms of just like from a well-being standpoint, like what do you do now? Like, is it mindfulness, or like, is there something that you instill, or?
Personally? So I have a really hard time with that. I wake up I'm not every day, but like I operate as much from a place of fear as anybody else does, as much from a place of anxiety, as much from like, oh my God, what does the future hold? I have no idea. And I'd say mindfulness, as like aware of issues as I am doing something about them, is a totally different thing. And sometimes doing something about them means actually doing something about them, and sometimes it means just changing
what you're
the
thinking
state
about.
or not thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so funny, because I am someone who's like really allergic to dogma. I'm embarrassed saying namaste. And I've just started doing this thing called The Class by Taryn Toomey. And so I know they have some studios here. I think they might have one in LA. And I've only done it twice. But I leave feeling like really, really great. So I'd say like anything that gets you out of your body, anything that like, for me, it's just like, if I can stop thinking or remove control or have no decisions to make, that's the dream. And as far as mental health goes, one of the top pieces on girlboss.com is how to talk to my boss about being depressed, which like nobody talks about, right? And how do you leave room for women to bring not just what they do to the table and represent that, but who they are? And all of us, all of who we are, be kind of received in the workplace. And we have someone at the office who has some health issues, who really, really value, who's incredibly talented, who we suggested and said, hey, you're having like a hard time. Why don't you work part-time? We'll find someone to fill those other hours. You can take care of yourself. And when you feel better, of course, there's going to be a job for you. And she's also writing a tarot deck, a book, and designing a tarot deck. So being able to support people at different stages in their careers is really important to us, and also having them grow with the business.
How many of us struggle with health and taking care of ourselves, right? I mean, it's so tough, and prioritizing ourselves. And so so now let's talk about Girl Boss in these last 5.5 minutes. Tell us about what the company is now, and also I'm so interested in like these young women in their 20s, 29 years old, I think you said was like that median age, and we were saying earlier too about a lot of like one of the first questions is, what's the right time to leave my job, which I think is interesting because as companies are trying to figure out retention. And so I'd just love to hear about, tell us about what Girl Boss is now and about these women.
Yeah, so Girl Boss is really about redefining success. So first, individually, we can do it together. We can share the tools and the ideas and, hey, this works for me, right? But for each of us, that's a different answer. I met someone on the plane here who said, I said, what do you do? She said, I'm a professional mom. And I was like, oh my God, I love that, because stay-at-home mom can kind of sound like you're staying at home, which is not the case when you're a very busy mom. So embracing whatever that means, and it doesn't just mean work, it doesn't just mean money, and we're living in a paradigm where this vision of success has been work and money, and it was determined by old white guys a really long time ago. They invented a magazine that I'm very grateful they put me on the cover of, but that's just not what the world is today. And these legacy employers are having a really hard time recruiting because they have these really staid workplaces that don't necessarily embrace diversity or embrace women, and they don't know how to navigate this new world. And they're coming to places like She Summit, and they're coming to Girl Boss to say, hey, we need help. And they need to, change from the inside, but also market themselves as a place that should be as an employer of choice, right, for every kind of person to come to the workplace. So as far as what Girl Boss is, we have a podcast network. We have something like 6 shows. We're launching one with Uber in a few days. We work mostly with brand partners to date. We do some ticket sales. We have a conference called the Girl Boss Rally. We're having one November 17th and 18th in Brooklyn.
Awesome.
Ariana Huffington speaking. It's going to be great. This will be our 4th one, so we do 2 a year. And we create content on girlboss.com. Right now we're building something that is what I hope looks like somewhat of an always-on conference. And this is something I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about in the coming month. It's called Girl Boss Collective, and it's what a conference might look like online. It's something between LinkedIn and Quora or Reddit, in a place where what happens physically at an event like this can happen online. So that's what our future looks like. It's actually in technology, which is really exciting, because that's a business you can scale.
Yes.
Events are really hard, brand partnerships are really
You're telling
hard,
me.
and we do that stuff, and it's so fun because we work with brands to do things that make them really proud of the work that they're doing and creates real value for our audience. We don't have banner ads, we're not really selling media, even though we do create content. We're creating incredible experiences. We're giving away $200,000 with Uber, $95,000 to one person, and then the other, and that's brands are coming to us to say, hey, how can we do a better job? So it feels like a win-win-win, and nothing's mercenary. It's all creating more value, which makes our jobs very fun.
And you are, this is an area where, as an entrepreneur, you're magic, right? And understanding how to create a digital business. And what I hear is it's so innovative, right? It's all these innovative, you're almost following what the market is telling you, as opposed to, and that's what a true entrepreneur does. And so do you have a certain, this is what you always do? Is it listening to the community? In terms of shaping the model and where it's going? What's your, tool there?
One, I think it's good just to remember that regardless of whether you're on a stage or not, like, nobody knows what they're doing. So I can tell you about what I think I'm doing, but I have no idea what I'm doing. We listen, like, we really listen. We have this super active vocal community of women on our socials, at the rally, and in a private Facebook group called the Girl Boss Gang, which we have about 5,000 women, and that's really been the petri dish of, like, listening for what we're building today. And they're asking one another everything from, I'm going to Austin and I need Wi-Fi and an outlet, where can I work for free for half a day? Or, I have 3 logos, can you guys help me pick one? Or, I got a job offer and my employer matched it, how do I turn them down gracefully? Or, you guys, I had an awful day, I need some words of support. And so what we're building is really just based on that learning. And with technology, there's a ton of processes to do that, with user testing and research and like the entire kind of stack of product design and user research, which I'm really excited to learn about.
Amazing. Wonderful. And so we're about to wrap up, and like, this is so good because we're hearing just so many innovative ideas, right, of taking, you know, these strategies and applying them to all of our lives and our work. So any final message that you would like to leave with the audience, as, you know, our theme is really like driving change and leading change from where we are, you know, for equality, for humanity, and doing good in the world?
I think change just starts with what you ask for and accepting no less than what you deserve, right? And just saying, like, you know, you don't get what you don't ask for. And there's very little to lose by asking for what you want or what you think you're worth. So I just say, like, advocate for yourself, advocate for the people around you, help them ask for what they want and deserve. And then, you know, there is the tops down change that can happen, but it also happens from the bottom up.
That's great. Being bold. And being bold is hard, but yet it's like, you know, it is like every single day. It's like, you know, it's so simple, and yet so many of us don't do it.
It's terrifying, and if you're not terrified, you're probably doing something wrong. So just like,
fear means go.
you should be terrified. I'm terrified.
Yeah, me too. Most of the time.
On that note.
Yes, thank you. We're terrified.
Drink
yes.
cocktails.
Yay. Thank you so much.